Good day to everybody that is joining us today for this episode of Traffic Talk. Thank you for watching. And today is very exciting. We're being joined by Brother Terry Schock from Alexandria, Louisiana. I'm excited. I feel like I should have a pen and paper writing notes because there's always something quotable when Terry Schock is talking, it seems. So why don't you take a second and just greet everybody that's watching today?
Well, hey, thank you for watching. I've watched a few of these interviews, and I appreciate Matt taking the time. If you could see his car, it's quite geared up for this. This man knows what he's doing. He may have a future with some major network before this is all said and done.
There's all
Apostolic network,
right.
Obviously.
There's all kinds of wires just out of frame that you can't see. So. Well, this is actually something I've never done before, but I wanted to do a little speed round. So
okay.
Just short and sweet, to the point, quick answers. So first question is your favorite Bible verse.
Matthew 6:33. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you.
Very good. Favorite quote?
If you'll deepen, God will broaden. That was my dad's quote to me when I was called to preach when I was 16.
Favorite food?
Mexican
food. Very cool. Favorite vacation destination or type of vacation?
Type of vacation. Okay, that'd be a couple of things. Crested Butte, Colorado is probably a favorite place that we go, and then any cruise.
Okay.
So cruising or Crested Butte, Colorado mountains.
And no particular cruise destination, just a cruise.
Just a cruise. I mean, we'd like to do in Alaska someday, but we've not done that yet.
Favorite subject to preach about?
That would have to be Jesus as a servant, serving, something to do with people serving, with Jesus as the example of that.
Gotcha. Okay. Favorite or most impactful sermon that you've heard?
Favorite sermon would have to go back to whenever I was a little kid with Brother Lumpkin, and he preached a sermon called "Cramming for the Final." Of course, Brother Lumpkin, he could speak in a way that you can remember for years because of the story. So I'd say that would be on the favorite list. Impactful would have to be Pastor Anthony Mangan's sermon at Arkansas senior camp, sounding an alarm to my generation. Mm-hmm. That I was 17 and had been called to preach when I was 16, mm-hmm. and I was the last one out of there. I mean, by the time I got through, opened my eyes from praying for I don't know how long, the tabernacle was dark, everybody was gone. That was a big life change moment.
And last but not least, your favorite child out of the two that you have?
Okay, I have two children, so let's see, would you say Ken or would you say Bradra?
Okay, yeah.
So you'd have to merge Kendra and Braden some way in there to get my favorite child. So Bradra would probably be my favorite child. That flows a little better. Not to offend Kendra with the K not being first.
Oh, right. Well, she was born first, so she has that. So.
She was born first. But
I'm going to ask you, who has most impacted your life and why?
Okay.
Big questions today.
Yeah, and that's good. To say one person, I couldn't, but I can give you a progression.
Sure.
Is that okay? My mother and my father. Even though my father passed away when he was 42, I look back now and just the way that he trained me and my three brothers. When I think back of the things he did and taught us, and now I'm realizing, he was 28 years old, 29 years old, mid-30s, late 30s when he was just pouring all of these major things in us. So my father and my mother would be, the big impactors first. Our home was an equipping home. We had fun, but my mom and dad were about equipping us. I've talked many times. that I had, he gave me a hallway in the church to clean when I was 7 years old. So it was always church connected. Whenever I was a teenager, I'd come home sometimes, and he would ask us questions like, after church, who were the kids you talked to and who were the elders you talked to?
So cool.
Always trying to that the quote, if you'll deepen, God will broaden.
Yeah.
All these kinds of things. I asked him one time, I said, why are you so concerned about us talking to kids and elders? He said, well, the kids will grow up, hey, if you're not nice to kids, they'll grow up hating you all their life, and if you're not nice to elders, they'll die and you can't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a very practical, basic, but so my dad and my mom. Then it would move to Brother Lumpkin. Brother Lumpkin became our pastor whenever I was in the 3rd grade. And Brother Lumpkin was just, he was one of these men that just, if you were around him, you were impacted by him in a major way. Well, he brings in Brother Patrick, Bill Patrick, who was my Christian school principal. Well, Brother Patrick is the first message that I preached at a youth revival, and that whenever I was in the 11th grade, Brother Patrick lined that out. He took me on my first missions trip. First missions trip was Brother Patrick. Brother Patrick told me, I'm taking you to a young ministers conference. And I said, well, I'm working, I can't afford it. I'm paying for it, I've lined it out. Well, he takes me to the second because of the times.
Wow.
And so it was there, that I look up in the choir and see Melani. So Brother Patrick would be a major impactor. Then it would be Melani. When we got married, Melani, impacted my life in many, many ways, and continues to, with the great revelation that she gets from the Word of God. And then Pastor Anthony Mangan. It was Brother Patrick and Brother Anthony, Pastor Anthony Mangan, that really the missions, the far reach of missions, and of course being connected with Pastor Mangan. It was POA, and what a great church, and all the people, the leaders of POA, and that's where I met you with the training center.
Absolutely.
And because of the times, North America, because of the times overseas, but so it would be hard for me to say, obviously my parents,
right,
because nothing would have happened without my parents. But then you can just see
each successive
you
season
can just
of
see
life.
how I could go on and on. I've been blessed with so many people that took an interest in me.
So you went to Because of the Times the second time they did it.
The second Because of the Times.
What series of events led to you actually going from Arkansas to Louisiana?
Okay.
And becoming a staff member?
Boy, that was a trip. So we are going to drive to the United States on this drive. No, that's fine. I'm fine.
You don't need to go into all the details.
No, I got you. I see her. I see Melani.
I should have guessed. Of course, you see her in the choir.
I see her in the choir, but I don't talk to her. We don't meet. I call Mickey because, Mickey was like a sister to us. So I call her, and we're talking, and so I start asking questions about, she narrows it down, finds out who it is, calls me back, long story short, sets up a time I come and speak and to their college class, and they tricked Melani into going out with me, and it's do a favor for us. And Melani did not want to do a blind date. She had not seen me, I'd seen her. So anyway, we get married. But 2 months before we get married, the Lord speaks to me clearly, you're leaving Fort Smith. I never intended to leave Fort Smith.
The plan was for her to come back to
Yes,
Fort
absolutely.
Smith.
Well, she did. So we get engaged, we get married. She comes to she comes to Fort Smith. That was the plan, but it was just 2 months ahead of time that I felt this. Well, so now we're very uneasy. It's weird. nobody knows what's going on. I don't know what's going on, you know. So then we get a call. A church in Louisiana wants us to come be associate pastor. And so we go down there, not POA. We go down to this church, feel that it's God's will, come up, resign at Fort Smith. They give us a great going away party. We're packing the U-Haul. I'm taking the last bit to the back of the U-Haul. I'm walking out there, and the Spirit of the Lord speaks to me and says, you're making a big mistake. You cannot move. This church had already moved the people out of the house that we were supposed to move into. So I call. It was strong enough that I knew. And so I call. Now it's confusion. Now it's mass confusion. Her mom and dad drive up from Alexandria to Fort Smith, 7 hours, whatever it was then before interstate. And we're literally sitting in our empty one-bedroom apartment. My mother-in-law sitting on the only chair. My father-in-law, Ken Brady, is on the floor. Melanie's on the floor, and we're nobody's saying anything. And he looks at me and he says, "Well, son, you know what are you going to do?" I said, "Pop, I don't know what to do. There's nothing I can do. Can I come and just wash cars at your dealership?" He had a Ford dealership. He said, "Come on, we'll do something." So now I'm moving. I'm moving to Alexandria, and I'm not invited. People think I'm moving to take a position. Now it looks like I'm leaving the ministry and going in business with my father-in-law.
Yeah.
And so that set off people just don't know. And
the peanut gallery.
Yeah. And so anyway, I tell people when they say, "How did you get to Alexandria?" I say, God pulled me out of Fort Smith and bounced me on my head backwards into Alexandria. And then, I was driving over the bridge in the U-Haul. The Spirit of God spoke to me and said, "You'll have a ministry with the young people of this church." Well, I couldn't go tell anybody, "Hey, I'm here, hire me." So for 2 years, there was a couple of other offers that came, and we turned them down, and so then it even made it look even more like that we were leaving the ministry and going in business at the Ford dealership.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later, pastor asked me to be youth pastor, but they had just moved into the present sanctuary, and so for 2 more years I was part-time. But anyway,
the rest is history.
There's other details in there, but that's about as small as I can make that story.
I didn't realize all of that went on in the background. That's neat. Of course, you evangelize, you travel exclusively now. So when you go into a church, into a city, what is your process there? Do you try to lay things out ahead of time? How much flow is involved there? You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah. I'm like any other pastor, preacher, whatever. You're always listening for a word from God, and if you feel that is a word to a church, then you're building a message around it. Mm-hmm. It has to start with a word from God, not a good illustration you hear from somebody or a good sermon you hear from somebody. Or you got to have a word from God. Then there are messages that come together that I feel that God has given me for churches, moving churches into more of a kingdom dimension. And then I'm just praying and seeking God for, is it this message? What's happened in this since I've been traveling, there have been multiple times that I've stepped in the pulpit and preached one page and it just goes another direction. Or I've sat on the platform and the Spirit just started giving me, I was preaching at John Russell's church.
Yes, Calvary.
A little bit ago. And I thought I knew what I was preaching, thought I had direction. But the Lord just started talking to me during the service. And so I wrote down a thought that I thought needed to go into the introduction, and then another thought came, and then I was like, well, God's just given a whole new word here. And so I walk up there with a sheet of paper and 4 thoughts. It's very easy, and here's what I had to struggle with for years because of my makeup. I'm a list maker, I'm a planner.
You want to be organized.
That's right.
Because that makes you feel like you're ready.
That's right. And I have missed it a lot in the past. I've over prepared. That's probably been the Achilles heel of what I have dealt with. There have been times whenever I preached a message at POA and we'd get home and Melanie would say, great series. In other words, that was so much information.
Information overload.
Yeah, it was information overload, and so it's been a battle. It's preaching has not been easy for me. Preparing to preach is not easy for me.
Well, that's not to be happy at another person's struggles, but that's comforting to know that it's it's not. I asked Brother Lumpkin years ago, I said, does it ever get easier preaching? He said, if it ever gets easy preaching, you're in trouble. Yeah, you're doing
he said, but now you will get to where the butterflies will start flying in more of a straight line. So I thought that was well put.
From all of your years as a pastor at the POA, and also just in your travels observing other churches, what would you say is one of the best facilitators of church growth?
There has to be a spirit move. There has to be. Whatever it takes for the Spirit to move. So what would that be? That would be prayer, fasting, a word focus, worship. The Spirit has to move.
Because the programs, all the extra stuff, it doesn't matter anyway.
If the Spirit's not moving, our programs are not going to carry people when they're having marriage trouble, kid trouble, job trouble, identity trouble. It's a complex world. We live in a fallen world. So there has to be a God connection.
Yeah.
There has to be a God connection.
So do you think that there's like a line to walk there? Because, of course, we could shut the doors and just pray and fast and not do things to bring. So what?
That's right.
Yeah.
Very good. Think about the tabernacle. Okay?
Yeah.
This is one thing that turned me on to organizing things around a church years and years ago when I thought about the tabernacle. In the church, we're not trying to be a corporation. But look at the Old Testament. That was very organized.
Yes, it was.
It was a very organized thing. But it was organized in a way and structured in a way that if the cloud started moving, the whole camp could move with it.
Right.
Well, there had to be an extremely amount of organization to be able to move all of those people with the Spirit. So I believe that programming has its place. I believe that church programming, I don't just mean service programming, but service and church programming, I believe that can hijack an apostolic church if you're not careful. But I believe that it can play a very important role. Yeah. It's almost like this. You've got preaching and programs and processes. In the apostolic church, we're amazing at preaching, we're decent at programming, and we're not doing good with processes.
That's a great assessment.
Because processes is what helps people become the church and not just go to church.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense.
So it all fits, but if the power of God, but if you don't have any power in the Holy of Holies,
who cares? So you were a youth pastor for many years, and I'm currently a youth pastor. So I feel this tension sometimes, and I'll get you to, I know this isn't one of the questions.
No, go ahead. I love talking youth ministry.
So, the balance between preaching and kicking a soccer ball or, whatever.
Okay. Absolutely.
Because you don't want to overdo it on the social and the fun and,
right.
and the games.
Right.
But, for us, for example, we've got kids that don't get why they have to sit and listen to a guy talk for 30 minutes, and like bus kids or so what is the balance there in particular for youth ministry, would you say?
Okay, there has to be a relevant word, but let's work out this word relevant, because that can go off the rails.
Sure, yeah.
Relevant to me is, what does that individual need to ensure that they are connected to God every day in their life?
Yeah.
What's it going to take to help that child, that teenager, pray every day and want to pray? Get in the Word and want to get into the Word. That's where all ministry has to start. Children, youth, whatever. Now, kicking a soccer ball, if there's not enough kicking the soccer ball with the bus route kids to build the relationship with them,
yeah,
they're never going to want to sit for 30 minutes. So that soccer ball is important. I used to tell people, it's okay to play golf, just evangelistically or relationally play golf.
Be intentional with it.
Be intentional with all of that. Because until you win that heart, until they trust you. I mean, Jeff Arnold said something preaching one time that was just so great. Of course, he said a million things great, but he said that hungry man needs a, I don't know if he said a sandwich or a hamburger before a track. Okay, there's a principle there that's huge.
Yeah.
Because we know what the real need is for teenagers and everybody of all ages. The real need is a relationship with Jesus Christ, a daily relationship with Jesus Christ. That's the real need. But the gateway to the real need is their felt need.
Their felt need, yeah.
And so we have to touch the felt need. And so kicking that soccer ball can be very sacred. So how much soccer do you need to do with somebody? As much as it takes to win their heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
For that relational build.
And I think communicating to the ones that are core and solid that
That's
this
right.
is not just for the purpose of kicking this ball.
This is not for us just having fun.
It's for them.
But one neat thing about youth ministry is you can have a lot of fun while you're doing it.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll conclude with the question, if you could say anything to the younger generation, to my generation, and around my age, what would that one thing be?
I think I would come back to what my dad told me. If you'll deepen, God will broaden. Young ministers try to do too much too quick to get their name out, to get seen, to get noticed. And you just need to dig, stay in the Word, trust God with your ministry.
Yeah.
Equip yourself. God is more concerned about His church than any of us ever will be.
Absolutely.
And God is the ultimate steward. He will move His resources where He wants them, when He wants them. And we get so worried about trying to prove that we're a 10-year veteran in a year or a 25-year veteran. It takes 25 years to be a 25-year veteran.
That's very good.
It takes 10 years to be a 10-year veteran. Just stay focused, stay apostolic, dig into the apostolic realm, and have faith that God knows where you are and what the next steps will be. J.T. Pugh told me something back when I was preaching youth revivals and I was at their church. He told me, he said, Terry, the prepared always go in. So it's just prepare. And like my dad told me at 16 years old, called to preach, if you'll just deepen, God will broaden. So when you start getting frustrated as a young minister about ministry, get your hand back on the shovel.
Yeah, keep digging.
Don't look for a microphone, look for a shovel. And God will handle it.
Would you say that when people in my generation, they do those things, they retweet the posts about us, and when we're sharing photos of preached here or there, do you think that actually hinders
I do.
the way that God can?
I do. I think self-promotion is a trap. It's kind of like a fasting, where the Bible talks about you can do it in private, wash your face, all that. And basically what it's saying is, if you go around talking about that you're fasting, I'm not talking about when the whole church is fasting and a leader, a pastor leading a church to fast. No, there has to be talk about that. Mm-hmm. But when you are talking about your personal fasting, it's like, if I understand the scripture right, that's your reward.
I think you're understanding
there
right.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not missing, fasting's hard. I'm not going to miss meals just so that I know can say, hey, good job. I'm wanting something to happen in the kingdom. I think when we start retweeting, it's almost like, whoever thinks that you did good, there it is. That's about where it stops. That's my own opinion.
I think when we put our hands on, God puts his hands off.
That's a good line.
Well, that's a great place to end today with some real wisdom there. But Brother Shock, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for the insight, and we hope you all have a great day. Thank you for watching. Have a good one.
Good deal.